The Genghis Khan one, it's sort of performance art. The guy who did it, I was originally going to have three Mongol experts. One guy bowed out very quickly. The second one bowed out a week or two before because her grandson got hit by a car or something in Israel. She was in Israel, and so I was left with this guy. I forget his name even, but he gives this performance. I think he's under like Klieg lights. It looks like he's going to be. It looks like someone's going to beat him with a tire iron, from a film noir film. And
It
he,
looked like he was constantly constipated.
yeah, and he's rocking back and forth, and the my the favorite moment from that is he goes, "You must understand, Munke Khan was the most underrated of the Khans." And the thing that's so funny about it is not that he's wrong about that, but how many people even know that there was a Khan besides Genghis and Kubla, And the way he's talking about the passion this guy has for that, and he goes into like a 3, 4, 5 minute explanation as to why Munke Khan was underrated and whatnot. And that's one of these kinds of things that makes it such a great interview, is that you get something that's seemingly so absurd, that just becomes a moment. Harold Wright, the storyteller, was originally going to be in the poetry translation show, but he wanted to do it by himself. Similarly, like to how I just told you off camera that I'm got at a single Wallace Stevens expert, a linguist, who didn't want to be with a show I'm planning on doing Wallace Stevens like I did with Jefferson Crane. This Harold Wright, one of the best moments is Harold Wright gives this little short story about Japan, and this it's sort of like
Yes,
a
at the
Rashomon story.
ending.
Yeah, he goes through it, and the thing is, this guy was so appreciative. This guy did these translations. He's translated Emperor Hirohito's poems. This guy is the quintessence of someone who's an obscure person in literature in terms of no one is really going to remember much of what he did except as a translator. He didn't really write any poetry himself of any quality, but he was so thankful that I shown this hour-long light, or however long it was. Let's see, how long was it? That's an hour and 5 minutes. And uh, it was a terrific. It's a terrific hour to watch. He's just like John Spong. He's an old fellow who's constantly weaving in and out in front of the camera. The Oswald Spengler interview. That guy was just like the Genghis Khan guy. I remember I contacted him. He was somewhere in Croatia, I believe, was where he was in a hotel in Croatia. And if you look at the bare walls before he set up, he's in this desolate shit little hotel room. He's got bottles of booze on the bed. He gets up. He doesn't have an undershirt on. You see his hairy chest. I'm ringing when I'm calling him on Skype, I guess he's listening to Skype. He's getting up and he hits the Skype and he's like, And then I said, "Are you ready to do the interview?" He goes, "Yeah. Do I need to put my shirt on?" I said, "Well, if you prefer." It doesn't matter to me. So he puts his shirt on. So he's sitting in this. I mean, he's sitting in this seedy hotel room in somewhere in Croatia, with bottles of booze. He probably, who knows, probably picked up some woman at a bar, in Croatia, banged her, and he's hung over. But then he gets on, and after it takes about 5, 10, 15 minutes to warm up. And the interview goes on for an hour and 33 minutes. The first 5, 10, 15 minutes, you can see he's sort of waking up. And then, just like the Genghis Khan guy, he just goes on about Spengler. Spengler this. You must understand. Spengler, no, they get him all wrong. And it's another one. In my mind, the Genghis Khan and the Spengler guy are twin, because they're almost the same type of interviews. These guys who live their lives for Khan and Spengler, and they just are so wrapped up in it. Then there's the comic book.
There's a point to be made though about some of the little moments that you see.
Yeah.
I'm sure that many people who do watch these, whatever few they are at this point, are just putting it on the side and listening to it like a podcast. But I think it's important to watch the interviews too, because there's little moments in the background that give a tiny in to that person. Alex, for instance, we'll just go back to the first interview. Alex is very professional. He has a good webcam, but Harold Wright, his wife is, or apparently his wife is going in the background and fettering with his books, or someone's kid will come in there and
Yeah.
disrupt the interview, or the dog will start screeching. That shows a little bit of it shows some disorganized notions of how they are, but which is something that you would never get on any talk show that has ever occurred, because it's such a personal space that they're in. Because this is one of the positives of the Skype interviews. I want to make one point about the Genghis Khan interview, and then we'll move to the history of comic books, which is a terrific interview. He mentioned some of the underratedness of certain cons. That is, I agree with him. The whole Mongol Empire and all the cons are underrated in a sense, and not in terms of their historical import, but in terms of how much they have been given. Because there's the decline of the Mongol Empire as well, and it's eventually usurping into the rest of the empires that subsumed it, because it took quite a bit to take them down, since it was the biggest empire at that point and forever. Uh, I think that there's a story there, and people don't point to Genghis as you have as how important he was, but he basically changed the world with how he does. If you take Genghis Khan out, more than any other person in existence, the whole world changes.
Yeah. And there's a good point about it. That some people, like just this morning, a guy was saying, "Do I need Skype?" I send out these. When I send out my initial query, I always have bolded in the bottom. You need an internet connection, Skype, and a webcam with a microphone. I thought this was going to be a radio interview. No. Or people say, I thought this was just going to be me talking. I'm going to be on camera. I said, it's a video interview. The Dan Schneider video interview. You know, if I said the Dan Schneider Serbian interview, maybe I'd fly you to Serbia or something. But it gets to the point that most people don't read emails. And usually I have 3 or 4 paragraphs that I do. Most people will read the first 3 or 4 lines. I've had bosses at jobs I've had that I'll send, maybe a page-long email detailing some incident that happened the night before or some customer complaint or whatnot, and they'll read the first paragraph. I don't understand this. You don't have that much of an attention span? It's ridiculous.
And the Genghis Khan would also be an interesting study into greatness, because here you have someone, and I've looked at all sorts of history books associated with Genghis Khan and whatever remnants of his world and the Mongol Empire there's left. And this is someone who wanted to know everything, literally everything. He wanted to know. He didn't know everything, but he wanted to know everything. He was always looking for insight into things. And that is a good study and analogy for greatness, because the great seek that. They seek to change knowledge into wisdom, or at least to transfer knowledge into something else. It's kind of like as if it goes into a black hole and comes into a completely different universe that is unlike anything the rest of the masses have seen.
Yeah.